It all began on a warm Saturday in July 1999, a day that started like any other in the small town of Millridge. The sun was high, children's laughter echoed through the streets, and parents felt a comforting sense of normalcy. 5 kids, ranging in age from 8 to 12, were planning to attend the local church's annual summer picnic. It was a community tradition, complete with games, food, and a chance for the children to play safely while the adults caught up. No one had any reason to suspect that this day would mark the last time these kids would be seen alive. The children arrived excited, their backpacks bouncing with snacks and toys, their energy almost palpable. They ran around the churchyard, their voices weaving together in carefree harmony. Families watched them from nearby tables, laughing at their antics and sharing stories. But as the afternoon wore on, something began to feel off. A few parents noticed the kids disappearing briefly behind the old stone church building, or slipping near the abandoned baptism pool area. At first, no one worried. They assumed the kids were exploring or playing hide-and-seek. But soon, a sense of unease settled over the gathering. Hours passed, and the sun began its slow descent. Parents started calling for their children, their voices echoing through the emptying church grounds. But one by one, the 5 kids failed to appear. Panic set in quickly. Families searched frantically, scouring the picnic grounds, peeking behind trees, and checking nearby streets. Neighbors joined the search, forming makeshift lines to comb the surrounding areas. Every corner of Millridge seemed to hold the same unsettling truth. The children were gone. No footprints, no cries, no evidence of struggle, just an eerie silence where laughter had once filled the air. The police were called immediately, launching one of the largest searches in the town's history. Officers combed the woods, checked abandoned buildings, and even brought in K9 units to follow scents. But nothing led to the children. The investigation quickly hit a frustrating dead end. Witness statements were inconsistent, and no one had seen anyone suspicious near the church that day. Even the security cameras from nearby shops, rare in a town like Millridge in 1999, showed nothing. The sense of dread deepened with every hour, as families realized this wasn't a simple case of kids wandering off. It was something far darker. By nightfall, the town had plunged into a state of fear and confusion. News crews arrived, their flashing lights casting long shadows across the streets, interviewing frantic parents and neighbors. Rumors spread like wildfire. Some said the children had been kidnapped by strangers, others whispered of cult activity or occult rituals. But the truth remained stubbornly out of reach. In homes across Millridge, parents sat awake, unable to sleep, staring at empty beds and imagining the worst. That night, the town that once prided itself on safety and community became a place haunted by unanswered questions, and the disappearance of those 5 children marked the beginning of a mystery that would linger for decades. As the news of the children's disappearance spread through Millridge, the town seemed to shift overnight from a quiet, peaceful community into a place gripped by fear. Parents began locking doors earlier than ever, checking windows obsessively, and keeping their children close. Streets that had once been filled with the carefree laughter of kids were now eerily silent. Playgrounds sat empty, swings swaying gently in the wind as if the echoes of laughter had vanished along with the children. People whispered behind closed doors, wondering if the culprit could be someone they knew, or if something far more sinister had come to their town. Local authorities were overwhelmed by the growing panic. Officers were on constant patrol, trying to reassure residents while simultaneously following up on every lead, no matter how improbable. Community meetings were held in the evenings, where parents demanded answers, sometimes angrily, sometimes on the verge of tears. Volunteers joined in organized search parties, combing the nearby woods, abandoned buildings, and riverbanks. But every search ended with the same result: empty hands, no clues, and a town sinking further into unease. The tension in Millridge was tangible, thickening the air with a sense of dread that seemed impossible to escape. Rumors spread like wildfire, each more disturbing than the last. Some townspeople whispered about a stranger seen lurking near the church the morning of the disappearance. Others claimed they had noticed strange symbols etched into the trees surrounding the picnic grounds, or odd fires burning in the woods at night. A small group even suggested that a local family, previously trusted and respected, might be hiding dark secrets. Every theory seemed more chilling than the last, and no one could agree on which, if any, held a grain of truth. The fear was feeding itself, growing bigger with every whispered conversation and late-night speculation. The children's absence also had a profound effect on the adults of the town. Parents who had once felt confident in the safety of Millridge now questioned every decision, every familiar face. Neighbors who had been friendly now eyed each other warily, unsure who to trust. Teachers at the local school spoke in hushed tones, trying to explain the impossible to students who were confused and frightened. Community gatherings, once a source of joy, were cancelled or avoided entirely. The disappearance didn't just affect the families directly involved. It rippled through every home, every street, and every heart in the town, leaving behind a pervasive sense of vulnerability. As days turned into weeks, the panic deepened into a haunting routine. Families would drive past the church repeatedly, hoping to catch even a glimpse of something that could explain the unthinkable. Neighborhoods organized nightly patrols, shining flashlights into dark corners and abandoned buildings, but the darkness seemed to swallow everything. People began to speak of the shadow of 1999, a phrase that lingered in conversations and in the minds of children who had narrowly escaped the event. Millridge had become a town trapped in fear, caught between the memory of those vanished children and the unknown fate that seemed to lurk just beyond sight. 26 years passed, and the case of the 5 vanished children slowly faded from the headlines, slipping into the realm of cold cases that townspeople whispered about only in hushed tones. Millridge had changed. New families moved in, old buildings were abandoned or repurposed, and the memory of that summer day lingered like a shadow. Yet, for a small group of local historians and paranormal enthusiasts, the mystery had never truly ended. They were determined to uncover what had been missed, to dig into forgotten files, and to revisit locations that authorities had long written off. Their first stop, the church where the children were last seen. The church itself had been closed since 2001, its windows boarded, and its once pristine exterior now covered with peeling paint and creeping ivy. Walking through the overgrown yard, the investigators felt a strange energy, a sense that the building itself was holding on to secrets. As they carefully inspected the interior, one of the team members noticed something peculiar near the old baptism pool. Faint scratches, almost invisible to the untrained eye, traced a path across the stone floor, leading toward the pool itself. The marks were subtle, too subtle for anyone in the past to have noticed, but now, with the right lighting and careful observation, they seemed to tell a story of movement, of struggle, and of something hidden beneath the surface. Intrigued, the team began photographing and mapping the marks, trying to understand their pattern. It became increasingly clear that these weren't random scratches or wear and tear. The drag marks had a deliberate direction, moving toward a specific area of the pool. The investigators speculated about what could have caused them. Were they evidence of the children being taken, or of someone trying to hide something in a hurry? Each step they took was met with a rising sense of dread. The air seemed heavier in the church, thick with dust, decay, and a lingering tension that felt almost alive, as though the building itself was aware of their intrusion. The more they examined the pool, the more anomalies emerged. The wooden platform covering part of the pool appeared slightly warped, as if it had been lifted and replaced repeatedly. Small chips of stone and faint scuff marks lined the edges of the basin. The team realized that the drag marks did not lead into empty space. They ended at the very center of the pool, as if something had been taken beneath its surface. Heartbeats quickened, and a shared sense of urgency gripped the group. Could the children, or evidence of what had happened to them, have been hidden here all along, in plain sight yet completely invisible to generations of searchers? As the sun began to cast long, eerie shadows through the broken windows, the investigators knew they were on the verge of a breakthrough. Every instinct screamed that the drag marks were more than just a clue. They were a trail left behind by someone desperate, or perhaps by something even darker. The discovery demanded a closer inspection, and despite the growing unease, the team steeled themselves. The next step would take them beyond the visible, into a hidden space that had remained untouched for decades, a space that might finally answer the questions Millridge had carried for over 26 years. Following the drag marks to the center of the baptism pool, the investigators noticed that the wooden platform covering the basin seemed strangely heavy, almost as if it was concealing something beneath it. With flashlights cutting through the dusty darkness, they cautiously lifted the boards, revealing a small trapdoor they had never seen in old blueprints of the church. The metal hinges were rusted, and a thick layer of dust suggested it had not been disturbed in decades. A collective shiver ran through the group. The hidden chamber was real, lying beneath their feet, a secret buried in plain sight all these years. As the trapdoor creaked open, a wave of stale, oppressive air escaped from the chamber, carrying the scent of mold and decay. The beam of their flashlights revealed a narrow staircase descending into darkness. Each step groaned underfoot, echoing through the confined space like a warning. Cobwebs stretched across the corners, and the walls were damp and covered in stains that hinted at long-forgotten horrors. The investigators exchanged uneasy glances, knowing that whatever lay below could finally explain the nightmare that had haunted Millridge since 1999, or it could plunge them into an even deeper mystery. Reaching the bottom of the staircase, the chamber revealed itself in full, a small, enclosed space barely large enough to hold a few people. Yet scattered across the floor were items that sent chills through everyone in the room. Children's shoes, a torn backpack, faded drawings, and a crumpled notebook, all seemingly left behind in a hurry. Symbols were etched into the stone walls, intricate and disturbing, hinting at ritualistic activity. It was clear that this place had been deliberately concealed, a dark secret hidden beneath a site once meant for holy ceremonies. The contrast was jarring. The place of baptism had been turned into a sinister hiding spot. As the team carefully examined the chamber, they discovered traces of long-forgotten human activity. The floor bore faint scuff marks, as if people had moved back and forth in a panic. Dust-covered shelves held remnants of items that seemed incongruous: old candles, bottles with strange residues, and scraps of paper with cryptic writing. Each detail told a story, hinting at meticulous planning and a horrifying purpose. It was a chilling realization. This chamber had not been a random hiding place. It had been crafted for secrecy, for control, and possibly for something far worse than anyone had imagined at the time of the disappearances. Despite the overwhelming fear, the investigators pressed on, documenting every corner of the chamber with photographs and notes. The air felt heavier with each passing moment, thick with the weight of past events. Shadows flickered in the flashlight beams, and every creak of the old church above reminded them that they were not alone in spirit. The hidden chamber, silent for over 2 decades, held answers, but it also held questions, some of which seemed too dark to fully comprehend. As they peered into the corners, it was impossible not to imagine what the children had endured, and how a place meant for cleansing and life had been transformed into a tomb of secrets. As the investigators sifted through the remnants in the hidden chamber, a disturbing pattern began to emerge. Among the scattered items were old photographs, worn journals, and tattered pieces of clothing, personal belongings of the children who had vanished over 2 decades ago. Each object seemed carefully preserved, almost deliberately left behind to tell a story, though one filled with horror and secrecy. The photos depicted the children smiling innocently, unaware of the darkness that would soon engulf them, while the journals contained notes written in trembling handwriting, some by the children themselves, describing days that suddenly went missing from their memories. One of the most chilling discoveries was a leather-bound journal, its pages yellowed and brittle. The entries described events leading up to the disappearances with a level of detail that was almost obsessive. The writer, later identified as a member of the church's community, documented plans and observations about the children, noting times they were alone and when they could be easily lured. Certain passages suggested a dangerous fixation on purifying or guiding the children, using language that was at once ritualistic and clinical. Every page the investigators turned sent a shiver down their spines. This was no random act, but something carefully orchestrated. In addition to written records, there were drawings and maps pinned to the walls of the chamber. These crude sketches depicted the church, its surrounding grounds, and detailed pathways leading to the baptism pool. The drag marks they had discovered were clearly marked, along with notes about timing, movement, and surveillance of the children. It became terrifyingly clear that the hidden chamber had been part of a plan, a place prepared to hide and control the children for an unknown purpose. The room itself felt like a time capsule of evil, a preserved slice of history that authorities had overlooked for decades. Further examination revealed small personal artifacts that seemed almost symbolic: 5 small pairs of shoes, each paired with a handwritten name, and tiny trinkets that belonged to the children. These items were arranged carefully, as if left as evidence or perhaps as an offering. Investigators speculated that the perpetrator may have returned multiple times, ensuring the chamber remained undisturbed yet marked with a traceable trail. The meticulous nature of this arrangement revealed a chilling intelligence, someone who had planned every step with unnerving precision and then vanished, leaving the children's fate shrouded in mystery. Even the air in the chamber seemed heavy with history. The faint scent of mildew mixed with something indefinably metallic, a reminder of the human presence that had once occupied the space. Forensic analysis of fingerprints and material traces suggested that the chamber had not been abandoned immediately but used intermittently over weeks, possibly even months. The investigators realized that the evidence in this hidden room was more than a clue. It was a window into the mind of someone capable of unspeakable acts, and it painted a picture of horror that Millridge had never dared to imagine. As the investigators delved deeper into the chamber, the drag marks that had initially drawn their attention took on a far more sinister significance. Forensic analysis revealed that the marks were not random. They bore clear signs of struggle. The stone beneath the pool had faint grooves and scratches, indicating resistance and panic. It became horrifyingly evident that the children had been forcibly dragged across the floor, and the pattern of the scratches suggested multiple attempts to escape. Every line etched into the cold stone told a story of fear and desperation, a silent testament to the terror the children had endured decades ago. Even more disturbing were the traces of materials found along the path of the drag marks. Small fibers, fragments of clothing, and faint traces of dried blood indicated that the chamber had been used repeatedly. Investigators realized that the children had been guided, or rather forced, into this hidden space over several days or weeks, not just on the day of their disappearance. The meticulous nature of the drag marks, combined with the placement of personal items in the chamber, suggested a calculated effort to both conceal and document the events. It was a chilling combination of methodical planning and unfathomable cruelty. The walls of the chamber provided additional evidence that pushed the investigation into truly terrifying territory. Faint handprints and smudges, preserved in the dust and decay, lined the edges of the room, marking the struggles of those who had been inside. Some prints were small and delicate, likely the children's, but others were larger, commanding, and deliberate, revealing the presence of someone who had orchestrated their entrapment. Symbols etched alongside these prints were ritualistic, mysterious, and deeply unsettling. They hinted at a belief system or compulsion that the investigators could not fully comprehend, an obsession that had driven someone to commit acts that defied explanation. As the team continued to analyze the evidence, they discovered that the chamber had been carefully organized to leave clues while remaining hidden. The placement of the children's belongings, the mapping of drag marks, and the symbolic carvings were not random. They were messages, whether to future discoverers or as a record for the perpetrator himself. Each artifact and mark contributed to a horrifying narrative, one that outlined not just what had happened but how it had been meticulously executed. For the investigators, the realization was chilling. The person responsible had not acted impulsively, but with deliberate planning that had spanned weeks, perhaps months. Perhaps the most unsettling revelation came when the team began to piece together timelines from the chamber. Notes, journals, and sketches suggested that the perpetrator had been watching the children carefully, knowing their routines, and exploiting moments of isolation. This meant the horror of 1999 was not a single impulsive act but the result of careful observation and control. The evidence painted a stark and terrifying portrait of someone who had manipulated every detail, from the timing of the abductions to the concealment of the chamber itself. Every discovery deepened the mystery, leaving the investigators and the town of Millridge with a growing realization that the truth was far darker than anyone had imagined. The discovery of the hidden chamber sent shockwaves through Millridge, reopening wounds that had never truly healed. Families of the vanished children, now adults themselves, returned to the town with heavy hearts, confronting the reality that the horrors of 1999 had been far worse than anyone had imagined. The church, once a place of worship and community, had become a symbol of betrayal, a place where innocence had been stolen and concealed. Even those who had lived through the disappearance but were not directly affected felt an unshakable unease, as if the shadows of the past had seeped into every corner of Millridge. Locals began reporting strange occurrences in the area surrounding the church. Flickering lights, unexplained noises, and fleeting shadows became a part of daily life. Some claimed to hear whispers carried on the wind, faint echoes of children laughing or crying in places where no one had been. Parents insisted on escorting their children past the church, quickening their pace and avoiding eye contact with the abandoned building. The town, once proud of its tight-knit community, now carried a palpable tension, an unspoken understanding that some places and some memories were best left undisturbed. Tourists and thrill-seekers, drawn by news coverage of the chamber, occasionally ventured onto the church grounds, only to leave shaken or terrified. Their stories, shared on social media and local forums, added to the town's eerie reputation. Some spoke of sudden drops in temperature near the baptism pool, strange markings appearing overnight on the boarded-up windows, or faint dragging sounds in the dark. Whether these phenomena were real or fueled by the imagination, the perception of haunting intensified, ensuring that the story of the vanished children remained a living nightmare for anyone connected to Millridge. Even within the church itself, investigators and visitors alike reported a disorienting sensation, a weight in the air that made breathing feel heavy. Flashlights would flicker inexplicably, and camera equipment occasionally malfunctioned when pointed toward the baptism pool. Some members of the investigative team admitted to feeling a presence, a lingering energy they could not explain, something tied to the terror experienced by the children decades ago. The hidden chamber had not only preserved physical evidence of the crime but had somehow trapped echoes of the fear, suffering, and anguish that had occurred within its walls. Despite the passage of more than 2 decades, Millridge remained haunted by both the memory of the vanished children and the chilling reality of what had been hidden beneath the church. The drag marks, the chamber, and the evidence discovered they had irrevocably changed the town's identity. Residents knew that even if the mystery was solved, the presence of that darkness would linger, woven into the very fabric of Millridge. Some nights, locals swore they could still hear faint whispers calling from below, subtle reminders that the story of 1999, and the terror it unleashed, was far from over. As the town of Millridge struggles to move forward, the hidden chamber beneath the baptism pool serves as a haunting reminder that some secrets refuse to stay buried. The drag marks, the scattered belongings, and the faded journals are more than evidence. They are echoes of innocence lost, whispers of a terror that cannot be erased. Even now, decades later, the church stands abandoned, silent yet watchful, as if holding its breath for the next chapter of its dark story. Locals avoid the grounds, and those brave enough to step inside report an unshakable feeling that the past is still very much alive. The children may be gone, but the fear, the mystery, and the questions linger, woven into the walls, the shadows, and the cold stone of the baptism pool. And perhaps the most terrifying thought of all is this: some secrets are never meant to be uncovered, yet somehow, they find a way to reveal themselves, leaving those who witness them forever changed. Millridge learned that truth, in its most haunting form, can be more horrifying than any imagination.
If you liked this video, don't forget to hit that like button, share it with your friends, and drop your thoughts in the comments below. Most importantly, subscribe and hit the bell icon so the next secret finds you first.